You might recall that subtraction is, or hopefully recall that subtraction is the inverse of addition. You start with 5, add 5, subtract 5, you're back to 5. And division is the inverse of multiplication. 5 times 10 divided by 10, you're back to 5. Simply put, one undoes the other. Likewise, the square root is the inverse of the square, and the cube root is the inverse of the cube. So we know that there's 1,549.2 square inches in a square meter. That's a given. How many inches are in 1 meter? Well, if I take the square root of both sides of the equation, I get the square root of meter squared is meter, because meter times meter is meter squared. Square root of 1 is 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. You could take the square root here as inches, and the square root of 1549.2 you do on your calculator, and you get that. So here I'm going in reverse. I'm going from the squared unit down to the metered unit, using the idea that the square root is the inverse of the square. This is the same as raising something. This sign here, the square root sign, is identical to raising to the power of 1/2. So if you put this in your calculator, this in your calculator, you're going to get 3. All right, so here's our problem. There's that many cubic centimeters, that many square centimeters in 1 square yard. How many centimeters are there in 1 yard? So I want you to think about how you're going to do that, and I'm going to come in and put down the work.
This ratio.
Okay, 5.13a. It says that there's this many centimeters squared. Square centimeters, right? In 1 square yard. So how many centimeters are there in 1 yard? So I hope you realize that to go from centimeters squared to centimeters, you got to take the square root. So basically this, let's copy that, is an equation.
To complete the table, we're going to use the idea from equivalent fractions and easily scale from 1 to 100.
Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides of this.
Ratio here, and I'm going
Well, the square root of 1, well, let's do this one first.
Recall,
let's take the square root of this. On your calculator, you should have a square root key, or otherwise you can do it this way. Just like this. You can, and this is how you might put it in your calculator. Raising to the 1/2 power is the same as taking the square root. So what you should get is
pick back up here next time.
91.22. But 91.22 what? Because we're going to take the square root of the whole thing. The square root of centimeters squared is centimeters. The square root of a square yard is a yard, because this is the same thing as yard raised to the 2nd power. So now we have our answer. 91.22 centimeters equals 1 yard.
They're per 1, like miles per gallon.
Here's a thought question. How do you think you would find that?
They're typically referred to
the cube root of 625,
is not a very small,
which means watt times watt times watt times watt equals 625. And you can put it in your calculator this way, which is about the only way.
It's not very helpful, right? But many times we have rates per 1, like $2
and you should get 5
per 1 gallon.
Why? Because 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 is 625.
Those are unit rates because they're per 1. So this example, just a grocery store has...
So 514, it says there's 27 cubic feet in 1 cubic yard. From this conversion, show that there's 3 feet in 1 yard, which we know is true. So let's see if we can do that. And this is how they did it. These are equal. They took the cubed root of both sides
any number over 1 is itself, so.
And so
3
they got
fifths
3 feet,
equals the
goes
number of
27
pounds.
raised to the
3
1/3
fifths.
power. Put in your calculators, 3, because 3 times 3 times 3
We
is
get
27.
3/5 of a pound of
The
grapes
cube of
for
1 is
$1,
1, because 1
pounds
times 1
per
times
dollar.
1 is
This
1.
not what this number just
And
goes
there's your
here.
answer.
It's still a rate. It's still a rate
So it says there's 1 billion
Switching the
cubic
order
meters in 1
of the ratio.
kilometer
This is a different
cubed.
unit rate.
And cubic meters can also be written
Here
this
we're
way,
gonna go to the
right?
grocery
Just
store, we're getting the
so you
same $5, we get the same 3
Meters
pounds of grapes.
raised to the
What's the
3rd
unit
power.
rate? In cost per pound.
So
Notice
it
the
takes
difference.
1
The other
billion
ones,
cubic meters to make 1 kilometer cubed. Use this to show that there are
Pound per dollar.
1,000 meters in 1 kilometer.
This one is dollars per
Kilo
pound.
meaning 1,000, right?
Cross multiply and divide,
So here we have,
and you
1
get
billion
5/3.
which is
Most
1
of these
times
unit
10
rates
raised to
in
the
last
9th
example
power.
are Reciprocals of each other, 3/5.
And that would be kilometers
Here's the
cubed, I mean
3/5 here.
meters cubed.
When you do it the other way, the rate, this is pounds per dollar. This is
And that's
dollars per
equal
pound.
to
This is 5/3.
1
Also note that to compute unit rate,
Kilometer
simply divide the two quantities because you want.
Now notice you have to take the cube root of both these
In other
things.
words,
This
you
is
take
how I would take the
3/5
cube root of 1
divide
is
it, you
1.
get 0.6 over 1.
So let's see what the cube root of 10 to the 9th
0.6
power
pounds per
is.
dollar.
Or
You
1
take
followed by 9
5/3
zeros.
and divide it, and you get
So I guess I would do it this
$1.67
way.
per pound.
This 1 times doesn't mean anything, so it's just gonna be
Here's the one we're gonna do. You spend
10
$39.90
raised to the
per
9th power.
14.3 gallons of gas.
and then raise
You wanna know
that
the
to
price
the
per gallon.
1 divided by 3.
Now, I'm gonna set this up as a proportion,
Put that in your calculator,
and you can do that too. Hit pause.
and you should get, if you do it correctly, 1,000.
When you're just trying to find the unit rate, notice that 39.90
Just
divided
thought
by
questions here.
14.3 gives you the
The
answer,
cube root is
So I really
1
didn't
is
have to
1
set
because 1 times 1
proportion
times
on it,
1 is
divide,
1.
which is probably what
Same
you
thing
want.
here, the 4th
I
root of
asked
1 is 1, the 5th root of 1 is 1.
39.90
The
for
cube root of
14.3
27,
gallons, you can just divide it.
what
And you're gonna
times
get
what
the
times what
dollars
equals
for 1
27?
gallon.
or put it in your calculator like this.
Okay, this is really important. Most students, they forget this. When you're dividing a ratio,
And when you do that, you'll
Here,
get that
the ratio.
because
it's important that we not forget about the bottom number, or thing two,
that.
this thing. A lot of times students will just divide, forget what it is the answer is. Thing two does not, this value is not always the one that comes with the most.
so now we're gonna switch to
Tricky.
just gonna do one algebra problem here.
The more is not necessarily the better price.
Difficult to do, but if you recognize
So I would
that the
press
square
pause.
undoes the square root, you can square both sides. So just as the
The answer,
division is the
notice
inverse of
I just
multiplication
divided.
and subtraction
I
is
set
the
up the
inverse
ratio
of
and I
addition,
divide.
the square root
forget
is the
that part
inverse
one.
of squaring a number.
So in this case.
The inverse of the cube root is therefore the
288 for 12
cubing,
ounces is
right?
a teeny bit cheaper, less expensive.
Therefore, the
per
square root of
ounce.
x squared equals
Now, if you flip
x.
this and divide backwards,
And there's a reason
you
for
can
that, it's
still
not
do
important.
the problem, but you're
So what we're gonna
have-
do is take x plus 3 equals 7 and square both sides.
So in other words,
and
if I
this,
divide it
of course, is
three-
gonna be
instead of
49,
dividing
not
389 by 16, if I
So we get
divide
x plus
16 by
3 equals 7.
389,
X plus 3
you have to be
equals
careful
49,
interpreting the result. This is the mistake.
and x
students make.
equals 49
So I'm gonna flip these around
minus 3,
and
which is gonna be 46.
put them up here and we'll discuss that.
So let's see if that works. Let's put 46 in for
Okay,
x.
so notice that I flipped it around and I just again divided 16.
46
divided
plus
by
3 is
0.89.
49.
I
The
got
square root of 49
4.113,
is 7,
and
so that's
ounce
correct.
is over $1.
So these are our
So
last two
here,
problems that we're gonna
And
solve.
notice if you just interpret this, and I should have put ounces here.
So on this one, it's gonna be important that we just move it here.
So a unit rate per capita means.
First thing we're gonna do is subtract 3
It's
from both
computed
sides.
by dividing by a population. All right, so we're gonna look at a
And then we're
unit
gonna
rate,
get-
but it's gonna be per person, okay?
X squared
Computing
equals
rates per person.
9.
We're all dealing with number words like
sense?
thousands, millions,
The
billions.
reason we can't
trillions.
just take the square root of both
Knowing how to
sides
do this
first
arithmetic
is
very
because
important.
I don't know
So
what
thousands is 10 to
plus
the third.
what equals x squared plus 3.
Scientific
If this whole
notation,
thing was in
and that's how
square
a
root.
lot of times you'll see it on a calculator.
So
It'll
now we
just
take the
say
square root of
E
both
plus
sides
12.
and we
So
get
thousands is 10 to the third. Millions
get it?
is 10 to the sixth.
X
9,
equals
12. Thousands, millions, billions, trillions.
All right.
6,
So our last
10
problem,
to that power. Writing scientific is very useful when dealing with very large and small numbers.
we're
So
gonna look
write
at this.
the amount of money spent on Social Security in 2000.
So this is the cube root of this entire thing.
9 zeros.
So what we can do,
To do this, we move the decimal 11 places to the left. That's the same thing as dividing by 11 tens. And this is from chapter 3. So
is cube both
start with
sides.
the number here. That's where the decimal is. We move it 1,
And when we
2,
do that,
3,
this just
4, 5,
becomes-
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 places.
Think about
If
it.
you divide it by 11 places,
X minus 4
get 808. To get the same
equals
number back,
9.
you have to multiply it by 11.
Add 5 to both
That's what we're
sides.
doing, dividing by 10,
I mean, add
dividing
4 to
by
both
10.
sides.
Scientific notation always has a whole
And
number.
we get
and a
x
decimal,
equals 5.
and then the rest of it. Let's do it the other way. The chance of winning the Powerball lottery just purchased is
So that's
0.0001.
Two algebra problems
133.
that apply the
So
same
write this one
methodology
out,
that
right
we've been using in this section.
You can read that, but I'll just explain it from here.